very busy September, and for some reason I am thankful for Nicole, because I thought this meeting was actually in a couple hours, and so good to have those reminder emails. And so I'm glad to be here on time with you all, and we got a lot of support. And I see Dr. Sai, you're over actually on the East Coast, Georgia, correct? And it looks like a beautiful day out there, but I see that if people do want to turn on their cameras, others, that would be helpful, in that to be able to get some feedback and just to see how everyone's doing. But welcome to the actually, this is the fourth series that we've had. We had two general overviews of the STEP program, and then last month we had the more deep dive into the countermeasures. And on this particular session, we're going to get into the implementation project, systemic, actually getting those treatments, projects done on the ground. And so just want to thank everybody for joining us. Hopefully everybody had a chance to either attend one of those first two general sessions or had an opportunity to go over the recordings, because we're not going to go back and over that information. We're assuming that you are already familiar with this information, and we're just going to get straight into the actual implementation processes. So we do have a little more time today, and so compared to probably last week's, and so we changed this up a little bit with regards to the agenda. And so we have two speakers as far as presentations go. And I'll have them introduce themselves, all the different the presenters. And then Lauren Blackburn also, who will be joining us a little later. She had a little bit of a conflict with a different meeting. And so she'll be joining us a little later. And she is actually our contractor for the STEP program. By the way, I got a little ahead of myself. I am Peter for those that maybe hopefully you saw the videos or attended the general session, so you should be familiar with me. I'm with the Resource Center of Federal Highways and a co-lead of the STEP initiative. So safe transportation for, let's see, I guess it's this way, right? Safe transportation for every pedestrian. And so we are doing a little more of a deeper dive here in California. I'm gonna share some stories or share some experience with California, but also this particular one session, we're going to be talking about some experiences with different agencies across the country as well. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and let, I think, Nicole, by the way, did everybody should have in their appointment got the agenda, correct?
Yes, that is correct. The agenda was emailed out yesterday as a reminder.
So I'm looking at it. Obviously, we'll go over, we did the sort of the welcoming and the Zoom overview. If you have any questions, do ask Nicole. I'm going to probably stop here in a couple minutes and then hand it over to Jessie Downing from Caltrans. And she was able to get a couple of special guests with us to be able to talk a little bit about some research, and also with regards to just being able to answer some of the Q&As that you guys might all have. These are just sort of short 15-minute presentations. We're expecting a lot of feedback from you all with regards to asking questions. I think we want to make sure that we address your specific questions. And so we did leave these short. So we do want a lot of interaction back and forth. We'll also have an opportunity with regard to getting feedback from those of you, looks like there's 72 of you out there, but what you guys are also doing to implement STEP, the different countermeasures. And just quick review, as far as the STEP countermeasures, we do have the crosswalk visibility enhancements, which had multiple pedestrian countermeasures, such as signing, intersection geometry, high visibility markings, lighting, if you remember some of those. And then we have the raised crosswalk, we have pedestrian refuge islands, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, the pedestrian hybrid beacon, road diets, and then the leading pedestrian interval. So just once a quick reminder with regards to the spectacular 7. And so how we got them under the ground, the process of getting them into the getting the projects done, whether by project or by maybe design process and so forth. So With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica Downing, and I'll let Jessica, you do your introduction as well as the guests. Okay.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Jessie Downing, sometimes Jessica, mostly Jessie. I work with Caltrans. I'm the pedestrian and bicyclist safety specialist in the Division of Safety Programs, which is a little bit of a newer program here at Caltrans. And I've been with the department for about 5 years in November. And prior to working with safety programs, I was in our Division of Transportation Planning. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Harvey. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. My name is John Harvey. I'm with the University of California Pavement Research Center, and we worked with my colleague, Professor James Tsai, and his team at Georgia Tech on this project. And they did 95% of the work.
Dr. Tsai, you want to do your intro, and you'll have to unmute yourself. That's the common term of the most popular term used in 2021, right?
Okay. Hey, good morning. So yeah, I think this is the research project we work with the Professor John Harvey and UC Davis and Complete Street. So we're quite excited to kind of work on this project and been quite intensively work with Caltrans as well as GDOT, as well as the 50 states of a survey. So today I'm going to share with you the outcome. And I would like to point out actually my team, they're a team member, they're doing a lot of work. So like April and then Ron, I'm not sure you were there, and Lucas, I think they're doing most of the work. So I just would like to acknowledge them. Yeah, with that, that's it.
All right, thank you. So Jesse, do you want to share your screen, or there's some others that, let's see, that needed to, seems like everyone's passing the work down. Anyone else that we want to introduce? Oh, there you go, Ron.
I can introduce myself real quick. I'm on Dr. Tsai's research team at Georgia Tech. I was responsible for helping create that survey that we sent out, and compiled performance measures and identified those gaps from all the state DOTs. And we got a 50 out of 50 response rate on that survey. So that article was a success in our mind.
Great.
Thank you.
And then I think PYU 68, I think it's the name there. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves as well. Assume they did some work.
Hi, yeah, I'm muted. That's my audio. I have the recording. I'm Lucas.
Okay.
I should rename myself. I'm Lucas G. I'm also working with Dr. Tsai. I'm PhD student with Dr. Tsai. And in this project, yeah, I did a lot of things. I've mostly been working with Ron as a pair. So we developed the questionnaire. We kind of like send out and categorize all the response. So yeah, that was a really interesting project, and I really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. And actually, let's just go ahead and take care of all the introductions right now, because I did notice that Robert Peterson, most everybody knows Robert, but in case some don't, you really should. And so why don't we go ahead and Robert, you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, Robert Peterson. I'm the office chief over the federal programs we call ourselves, but no, I don't have any part of the federal FHWA. We're part of Caltrans, but all federal dollars come into my office to administer for local assistance, local agencies. And so I oversee the safety programs, I oversee the bridge program and ER, and then other federal pots that come our way, my office handles. So thank you.
Great. And Robert will be speaking to us a little bit later. And let's see, who else do we have? Let's see. Oh, Tim. Yeah, Tim Taylor, Tim the traffic man Taylor, who's on my team. If you want to just, he'll be helping out with regards to some of the questions. Once again, if you can ask your questions into the chat pod, we'll address some of those there, but we'll also try to take some most of them audibly. But if you can put them there so we can queue them up and sort of prioritize. I believe that this tool does allow for upvoting, so forth with regards to questions that are asked. So we'll try that as well. But Tim?
Hey everyone, my name is Tim Taylor. I'm one of Peter's many sidekicks. Been working in areas of pedestrian safety now for 2-3 years, but my background's in traffic operations and engineering, and work with systemic approach to safety, road safety audits, speed management, aside from pedestrian safety issues. So glad to be here today, and excited about the next couple of hours.
All right. Thanks. And then Maria, I'm glad. Okay, great. We've got you on. So everyone should know Maria because she is in the California Division of Federal Highways and really is your main contact there. So.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bhatti. I am the pet bike safety point of contact at California Division of Federal Highway Administration. So good to see everyone, and thank you.
All right. I think I got everybody right. Okay. So Jesse, and I apologize that I called you Jessica earlier. I realized that that
Okay.
was probably brought back memories from kindergarten. So go ahead, take it away, Jesse.
The dentist always calls me that.
Dentist.
Awful. No worries. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen here. And can you all see the correct screen? Just confirm real quick before I jump in.
Yep.
Great. All right, thank you so much. So I introduced myself already. I'm Jessie Downing, and I'm glad to be here today. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview about my experience with both active transportation related asset inventory and asset management efforts in both planning and safety programs. So as I mentioned before, I've been with the Division of Safety Programs for about 6 months. And then prior to that, I was with our Division of Transportation Planning for about 4.5 years, I guess. And so these things that we'll be talking about today are actually spanning both of those divisions. So it's a kind of a multifunctional thing that we'll be talking about here. We'll start out with just a brief introduction to Caltrans asset management performance targets, and then we'll look at how each part of those specific areas falls into an asset management model. And then we'll go into how we collected our data for our active transportation asset inventory pilot that I led during my time in planning, and then some of the lessons we've learned from that effort. And finally, we have a special treat. We have Dr. James Tsai from Georgia Tech, who will give us an overview of a TRB paper that was recently released, and I think is really important to highlight here for everyone on the call. So let's start with an overview of the two Caltrans programs, planning and safety, and how both of those programs develop active transportation performance targets. So all the performance targets I'll be discussing today revolve around our Caltrans 2021, I believe, draft State Highway System Management Plan, which outlines needs, investments, and performance projections for a 10-year period for our State Highway Operations and Protection Program, our SHOP, and the maintenance program. So the performance targets and funding for the safety programs and planning are different. So the criteria for the performance targets is also different. They're also funded differently. It's important to understand how the data from both programs fits into the broader asset management process, including infrastructure inventories, which I'll get into in a moment. So on it's my right side, hopefully your right side. On one side of the screen, you'll see in yellow, planning's active transportation asset management targets specifically deal with closing gaps, eliminating barriers, encouraging a mode shift to walking and bicycling. So as you can see, there's two categories there on the planning side of things. One to fix our existing assets and adding new assets to fill gaps. So the data source for the existing assets is our active transportation asset inventory pilot. And the data that feeds into the add new category comes from the locations we identify in our district active transportation plans, or what we call our Caltrans active transportation plans, so CAT plans, usually the acronym we use for that. And then on the safety program side, we specifically are aiming to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. We also have two objectives we work with, which are proactive safety, to reduce the likelihood of future crashes where existing infrastructure could be enhanced or made safer, or systemic improvements. And reactive safety, which is typically associated with recent crashes or a specific concentration of crashes. So the reactive safety program is used to initiate safety projects as the needs arise. Lots of you probably already know that, but in case you don't, that's kind of the overview. So the Caltrans State Highway System Management Plan uses 3 performance management models to support the development of our future project needs over a 10-year plan period. And the easiest way to really pull this together is to talk about which asset management models each one of the planning and safety objectives falls under. The physical model is based on fixing our existing inventory by understanding the rate at which a facility deteriorates, and that's using a condition rating. So it's categorized into either good, fair, or poor condition. And the active transportation asset inventory pilot that I'll be talking about momentarily uses this specific model. The reservation model is what Caltrans uses to set aside funding for locations that are triggered by safety investigations. So these are where we have high concentrations of collisions, and that's about 60% of our overall safety investment. And then that third asset management model you can see there is the deficiency model, which improves or corrects issues on the state highway system. So conditions under this model are either good or poor. There's no in between. There's no fair condition rating in this model because the facility either meets our standards or it doesn't. It's also the model we use for our ADA program, to give you some context. So for establishing targets, we use the gap analysis from our district active transportation plans to identify performance targets. And that inventory data that we use is beneficial on lots of ends here. So when we're developing asset management performance targets based on these models, we can use that inventory to inform all 3 of these really, but specifically I'm going to look at this physical asset model, so the fix existing. So we created our active transportation asset inventory pilot in-house to really address the lack of roadway infrastructure data and the condition ratings for our existing active transportation facilities. And this pilot helped create a baseline of pedestrian and bicycle asset information on the state highway system. We worked with a few student assistants who mapped assets in all 12 Caltrans districts. And then we passed those maps along to the district staff to collect data using visual inspection methods, such as Google Maps or PathWeb, if you're familiar with that imagery source. And as you can see on that third photo, the district staff then inputted data about each specific asset, including its condition rating as either good, fair, or poor. So these ratings were based on existing condition ratings we use for striping and pavement. So we kind of adapted those to fit our needs. We kept the data schema as simple as we could. It was a challenge. We wanted to collect everything on the state highway system and beyond, but ultimately we decided to collect, I say only, in air quotes, only bikeways, crosswalks, and sidewalks, but this still produced over 26,000 mapped assets statewide. So seemingly simplified data, but it still produced a ton of data for us to work with. And one of our main business needs for collecting this data was to really ensure that we understood the existing conditions of pedestrian and bike infrastructure for our district active transportation plans. But that inventory information is also helpful when we're trying to establish patterns related to safety data. So more on that in just a moment. And then Nicole, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and putting up the first poll question. Great. So what we'd want to know from you all is, does your agency have an inventory of pedestrian facilities? So either yes, no, or partial. If you're a Caltrans person, I would say you could go under partial because we have this, this pilot. Great. Looks like we're almost halfway there with participants. So not surprisingly, it looks like it's sort of trending towards no. And that's not, you know, not a surprise to us. And I'm sure that's probably why most of us are here. Wait just one more second. It looks pretty much like we've got a 60-40 split. So I'll go ahead and end it there. And if you wanted to take a look at that. All right, I'm going to shut that down real quick. So to give you a quick overview on the planning side, we followed the process you see here to create asset management performance targets. Like I mentioned, we created an inventory pilot to understand where our facilities are located and then what condition they're in, which helped us calculate the total need in linear feet. And then once we had that number, we calculated costs using our complete streets cost estimator tool, which looks at construction cost database to estimate our costs. So when we calculate the needs, we're looking at, you know, how many linear feet are in good, fair, and poor condition, and then using our cost estimator tool to estimate the cost based on that. We also use a specific process to determine the needs for our systemic safety improvement programs. I'll go ahead and move on to that to give you a little bit more information there. So as I mentioned before, we also use the deficiency model to set performance targets for proactive safety improvements. So I'd like to specifically highlight our pedestrian systemic safety program as an example of that. The program was initiated in 2019 in partnership between Caltrans and UC Berkeley, and it uses statistical methodologies to identify locations that have a high risk of pedestrian injuries and fatalities. In our first year, this program generated about 500 locations for investigation and improvements, and we're currently in the second round right now. So I'll give you kind of an overview here. Our pedestrian systemic safety program addresses serious pedestrian injuries and fatalities before they occur, and we're using a combination of statistical analysis, crash modeling, and risk analysis. So the high-level overview here is first that we gather data from crashes. Then we perform a data analysis and modeling using a systemic safety model, like I mentioned, developed with UC Berkeley. So this model identifies locations, or what some people call hotspots, that are high risk for future crashes based on their specific features, context, and characteristics. And it's important to note here, we are proactively identifying locations at high risk for future crashes based on this data. We're not looking at where crashes have already occurred. That's that separate category I mentioned. So for instance, if based on past crash data, we notice that locations with a certain number of intersections have a high rate of pedestrian fatalities, we can then identify other similar locations where crashes haven't happened yet, and then develop solutions to prevent and mitigate them. So this is another place where an inventory can be beneficial. If we know that certain types of infrastructure are associated with higher crash rates, we can identify those locations and address them proactively. So once our analysis is complete, we have a list of systemic hotspots for each of our 12 districts. And you can see that in that color-coded table up there. And the color red illustrates the types of locations that might have, or that have, higher numbers of pedestrian collisions. So once the systemic list is provided to the districts, our district traffic safety investigators can then develop safety projects to mitigate crash risk for the locations on the list. And our intent is really to apply the systemic approach to all of our safety programs. So now that you have a better understanding of what our active transportation performance targets look like, let's go over what we gleaned from our experience here. My favorite part of this is the perfection is a roadblock to progress graphic up on the top there, and it couldn't be more true. I'd say if you're looking for one takeaway from all of this, that would be it. But, you know, from a process perspective, I recommend, you know, starting as early as possible. It's going to take longer than you might think, especially if you're using visual inspection methods like Google Maps. It's really important to build consensus and agree on a methodology in advance, and really be good about documenting changes and the process itself, so that you can capture that historical knowledge and it's saved for the future. I'd also recommend, especially if you're in a large organization, to use some kind of comment matrix resolution, something like that, to capture all of the comments and be able to show where you're addressing specific questions or concerns. I would also recommend that if we do this in the future, having more coordination with our districts. So one big lesson that we learned is, generating more needs doesn't necessarily mean more money. We have a finite amount of resources that we're working with, and showing more need isn't necessarily the best thing. And then, like I said, perfection is the roadblock to progress. So, I think that was kind of the general consensus that I've experienced speaking with others from around the country. So in addition to all that, on the data side of things, the most important thing I think is, does it exist and is it available? And not only that, is it available statewide or consistently throughout your jurisdiction or your study area? If it's not consistently available, when you roll up all of your data, it won't be easy to do your cost estimates and all of that type of thing. Obviously, we need better data and better data collection methods. So we really want to look more in the future towards automated data collection. So photogrammetry, LiDAR, that type of thing. And Caltrans hopes to move toward this more automated data collection in the future. And I don't think it's likely that we'll be repeating another manual data collection effort again in the future, just because of the amount of time it took. And hopefully we want to use more innovative technology in the future. Other thing is, I also really recommend decoupling striping and pavement condition in your condition ratings. It makes it a lot easier to estimate costs. So there's different costs for each one of those things, so it makes sense to split them apart. In our condition ratings, we were looking at both striping and pavement conditions in one condition rating, but it wasn't helpful in the end. It worked, it was a good interim solution, but if I had to do it all over again, I would split those two things apart. And if there are any other elements that you have costs for in other, in other infrastructure elements, I recommend taking a look at those condition ratings too, because some of those programs have existing ratings that you can kind of borrow from. I also would say, just to keep it simple, try to get something in place that you can build on. Don't try to create something perfect that is the end all be all. And then Nicole, if you could put up that last question, poll question. This is dipping into a little bit of what Dr. Tsai will talk about, but I kind of interested in what your agency or whoever you're affiliated with, what your biggest challenge is with collecting data. These are some of the, some of the answers that were asked in the survey that Dr. Tsai will talk about in a second, but curious to survey this specific group to see what your experience are. Looks like data is the winner so far. We'll see if this horse race goes any different direction, but it looks like response C there, the need for improved data accessibility, is going to be the winner. Yeah, it looks got about almost half. Great. Yeah, so funding is also coming in second there, but specifically, it looks like the need for improved data collection is kind of taking over. Great. All righty. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. James Tsai with Georgia Tech. He's going to tell us about a very interesting TRB paper that discusses what I've been presenting to you today. James, do you want to start with a quick introduction of yourself and take it from there?
You are on mute.
Yeah, James, unmute.
Oh, okay, thank you. So yes, I'm the professor here at Georgia Tech, and in terms of our research focuses, there's a three specific area. Number one there is in terms of the assets management. So we have been done for the past 20 years. and specific focus early is in the payment area. So that's why we're quite interested in the assets management. When the Professor John Harvey mentioned to me that let's work together on the complete street, yeah, we were quite excited to get into that. So that's the first area that we have. Second is transportation safety. So it's kind of putting together, try to bring courses there at Georgia Tech on the transportation safety data analytics. So those are the second area that we been working on. The third area that we are focused on is in the sensor technology. Over the past 20 years, we do a lot of the 2D image, 3D laser and LiDAR technology, and with a focus on the computer vision and machine learning. So do automatically data collection and detection. So we also have the study on the site work, the ADA compliant using the LiDAR technology to do the condition assessment. For the payment area that we also put in, just finished last year with a 3D technology, laser technology, and that's just putting together, become an AASHTO standard now. So those are the third area we focus on, intelligent and the sensor technology. So yeah, that's kind of just quickly introduce in terms of the our background. And I was just started it with the study.
James, sorry, could I give a quick 10 seconds?
Yeah, go ahead.
Higher
Go ahead,
level
please.
overview?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So, so the UCPRC works with Office of Pavement and Division of Maintenance on the mainline pavement management system for the last 10 years. And one of the big areas there is trying to go to this use of these advanced asset inventory technologies. And we've been working on complete streets, both in terms of life cycle cost, life cycle assessment, and also bicyclist perception of distresses and roughness, a couple other projects through National Center for Sustainable Transportation. And as part of our technology scanning, we identified James' organization as the national, I would say, international leader in the use of these technologies for asset management. So we also have another project working on with Professor Tsai on other types of features as well. And the overall arching idea here is to bring active transportation features into the mainstream pavement management systems, or if it is parallel, have synergy between those and so that they can communicate with each other. So I just want to give that quick overview. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, John. So I think as the Professor Harvey mentioned about, I think the whole idea there is to make complete street sustainable, that it is essential to establish a complete street assets management. Later on, based on this statistical review, you will see that there's a fair amount of the policy in 50 state DOT in terms of building complete street. How did you build, design? However, in terms of how do you manage that policy is quite lacking. So that's so I'll go ahead just talking about in terms of this slide here to share with you. So this is the study that we did. So I'm going to share with you the finding of our research. So one of them there, this is on the top, I think in the TRB paper, I think is the name of the title of a national survey and roadmap on the complete street implementation and assets management policy. And so that's the one we presented to TRB. And also I think the resources there is available is on the left-hand side. There's a final report is available too, which is called technology review and a roadmap and for inventory the complete street for integration into payment assets management system. And as earlier mentioned about, because the payment and bridge, those assets management quite mature. However, complete street is not available at this point in time. So I'm going to share with you some of the key findings we have. So as you can see on the right-hand side, those figure there, there's almost 39 of 50 states have some sort of plan to address complete street, but only 13 have a plan for asset management. So additionally, only 7 have performance measure for complete street, and only 15 have some type of complete street coordinator, because through the process there, the people identify, yes, coordinator is needed because it's kind of touch different offices there. So a summary of identified gaps, including a lack of performance measure, number 1, and second, need to assign responsibility to coordinator. And the third one, there's a rating system for the maintenance of complete street, as well as collection and management of data, such as condition data, and people talking about lack of crashes data, as well as pedestrian and bike counts. That's related to usage. So those are the one key item there that have been identified. Slide, please. So this slide here, I think it's going to show that to you that one of the key findings from this paper was a summarized list of performance measure obtained from various state DOTs for asset management of complete street. As earlier I mentioned about that, yeah, we get the responses from the 50 states. Quite appreciate we have 100% of the responses for the entire nation. And so we divided measure into categories such as usage and safety, condition, accessibility, and network label measure and others. And the purpose for setting up this one here is in the asset management, especially the complete street, like a sidewalk and a bike path in the future, you need to probably assess in order to operate systemically. You probably need to perform condition assessment as well as prioritize, allocate money for them. So what are the factors you want to consider? So this is a quite important performance measure that the factors in some of the state DOT they use. So some unique findings were that label of the traffic stress is often used as a performance measure. The perception of safety are listed since safety cannot always be measured. And the other one, prioritizing measures about a transit stop is often considered, and measures that don't necessarily related to transportation are even including, such as you can see there is a percent of adults reaching weekly physical activity, etc. So those are the one shown here. Next slide, please. So we go ahead to develop the roadmap. So there's 2 specific pathway I point out in here. There's 2 pathway here that I want to share with you. And one is improving data collection and analysis. And the other is asset management and performance measure development. As JC just do the last survey, based on the survey, the same, we find out the data collection, and that is one of the key. So that's why we, based on the responses and the key component, we start designing what's the roadmap moving forward and what's the pathway. So as you can see on the left-hand side there for the data collection pathway, we discuss utilizing both existing technology, such as LiDAR and 3D laser technology, and as well as the future technology, such as connected autonomous vehicle, as well as advanced cloud sourcing and smartphone, etc. Those technology to address the lack of the pedestrian and the bicycle usage, condition, and the safety data. So those are on the left-hand side in terms of one of the pathway. And in the asset management performance measure pathway on the right-hand side, we discussed the performance target for safety usage and condition of complete street. So a policy can be established to inform the agencies on how to quantitatively assess their system. So those are the two major pathways. And the next slide, please. So we, based on those two pathways, we kind of putting a comprehensive roadmap. So in this roadmap here, you can see there's two different color indicate that two pathway, certainly still have the other component included. And then you can see that we highlight the one with the dashed line indicate the one that need to move forward, research is needed. And for the one that with the square solid line, solid square, that indicate is already research being complete. And then we categorize them into the conceptual stage, research stage, development stage, and implementation stage of the asset management practice. So this is the one that we lay out in terms of this roadmap here. Yeah. John, are you going to adding a few words on this one here? If you
covered most of that. The key is the idea of these roadmaps is, and we have these for other areas as well, is the vision is up on the right-hand side, on the upper right, incorporate complete streets into asset management systems. And these are really the stepping stones that need to be done to achieve that, pretty much in covering the arc from the concept, which is what we're kind of starting to step out of now, with the work that Caltrans is doing, and this other work. But you really have to walk through all of these steps to get to implementation. And implementation means that this is embedded in everybody's daily work, and it's embedded in all the work processes, software, and databases that the agency will use. That's our definition, real definition of implementation. So that's the vision. And these are the steps that we see. And this is built off of similar roadmaps that started execution in 2009, 12 years ago, for the pavement asset management system. So this is kind of this is not particularly new territory. It's a new application, and also the new technologies now as well.
And one other thing I want to mention is here, it's just for the sake of time, so it's just kind of quickly showing that to you. But if you want to look into, there's in the final report, there's a comprehensive, each one there, which has been labeled, and there's detailed description of each box there. What's the detailed content in terms of the research, if you want to carry on, what need to be performed, what's the key content. Yeah. With that, I think I will stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Tsai. Yeah, that was great. And I loved what you both kind of mentioned about integrating complete streets into asset management. It's just a normal part of our asset management routine, rather than kind of keeping it as an add-on or just a grant program. We need all of those things too. But I think, one other thing I've sort of learned throughout this whole process is, I think in order to really implement this, we really need to make it more part of our normal routine rather than an add-on. So like that you said that, I will go ahead and put our contact information up here really quick. That's my by Clementine. Whoops, she went away. There she goes. So you can email both of us here, and then it looks like we've got some. I don't think we have anything in Q&A, but we do have information in the chat. So I'll go ahead and pull that up. And Nicole, are we doing okay on time?
Hi, Justin. Yes, we're doing good on time.
Great. Okay. And I'm also going to throw the link to the paper into the chat box here too. I'll go ahead and stop sharing this. I'm going to run into the chat. Great. So let's see what we've got.
It looks like there was, oh, okay, here we go. I did see one in the general chat. Just see if you see that. What if the locations with less fatality, but a lot of complaints from residents, does that warrant the safety improvement necessary?
I believe so. I think that that could be a perceived safety thing, but that's just as important. I don't think that we, want to de-emphasize the perceived safety side of things either. So there's multitude of ways of handling a specific location that you have safety concerns about. But we don't only rely on crash history. Perceived safety is definitely an important part of it. It's something we used in our Caltrans active transportation plans, so the district level active transportation plans. And then Dr. Sai also had it up on the screen, level of traffic stress specifically, which is tied to perceived safety. So it is being tied into this process for sure. But it tends to, the perceived safety side of things tends to be handled more by planning than it is by safety, but we still look at it as safety as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great.
And
if not, they can go ahead and come online. Actually, Nicole, are people able to unmute themselves? This new format is just a little bit confusing for me for some reason, but can they unmute themselves and ask questions?
I think there's another question, right? Related to separate striping and pavement.
Peter, yes. I will be able to mute anyone who would like to speak up and ask a question. If they could just go ahead and raise their hand, and then I will give them that function.
Great, thank you.
Nicole and Peter, there's a question in the Q&A you can read too, please.
Yes. Okay, so it says, until all of that research is completed and implemented, are there plans to separate striping and pavement condition ratings for the CT data moving forward? If so, how often will that data be updated?
Yes.
so I think the next round of looking at this data specifically, looks like there's some feedback, will probably be, I think it's 2 years from now when the next SHSMP comes out. Probably less now, the pandemic time runs together for me. But basically, I think we'll start looking at that again within probably about a year. And it won't be, I don't think it'd be that hard to separate those two. The issue there is going to be getting a new set of data to look at. So hopefully we can move toward that automated data collection in the future, and it'll make it a lot easier to split those things apart. I think we're kind of working with the best available data and sort of, asking others, but the condition ratings that we used were from maintenance and they were striping conditions. And then we kind of like tacked some pavement, more qualitative pavement condition ratings on there. So the intention, is to split those apart. I'd say it's probably going to happen within the next few years, but don't quote me on that. That's our plan. And I think there was a near miss question.
Yes, in the regular chat pod, is there a way for near miss to be documented?
From the Caltrans side of things and what we've used in terms of near miss data, the closest we've gotten to that is trying to use the UC Berkeley Safe Trek. I always call it the wrong thing. I believe it's the Street Story tool. And you can find that on the UC Berkeley Safe Trek website. And that documents near misses. So we've tried to use some of that data where it was available in the active transportation plans for the districts. But I don't believe we collect that on our own. So we've tried to boost that tool through some of the public involvement efforts that we worked on as part of the CAT plans. But we don't have anything separate like from Caltrans that we've used to collect that data, but there is some out there.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any other questions. I think I saw comments.
There's a hand up from Shahid.
Oh, there. Oh, thank you. Yes, Shahid. Do you want to, Nicole, can you unmute Shahid?
Yep, Shahid is currently muted, so go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Nicole. This is Shahid with South Pasadena. I think I really like your, I think that you're doing a great job educating us and refreshing our, safety is important. I have a question. I've been in the traffic field for 30 years, working from East Coast all the way to San Francisco and LA. A perceived safety issue, where I always have a concern with the perceived safety issues. It was not there 20 years ago or 10 years ago, but recently it has popped up into our culture, into our policy guidelines also. And I think we are also aware the highest number of fatalities and injury crashes take place in an urbanized suburban area on a signal on a stop control intersections. And if we do an audit of a stop control intersection in any of the urban cities, you will find more than 40% to 60% of those are unwarranted traffic signals. And these are installed, it's not traffic signals, sorry, stop signs, and they are installed under perceived safety issues, which recently Manual of Uniform Traffic Control has made a lot of flexibility. And there's always a conflict between a professional and my citizens. Anybody who drives or lives on the street is a better traffic engineer than myself, and they make an issue of perceived safety. And the council always align with the resident. At the end of the day, we end up installing number of those perceived safety concerns, turning into a traffic stop signs, and then creating more problems. I think we should have a very clear-cut policy. If we want to have a different sets of rules for urban areas, residential streets, we can have it, but it should be well documented and they should be quantifiable. So everybody plays by the same rule. The moment you give us a flexibility from a traffic engineer, that you have a flexibility depending upon the circumstances, my flexibility goes with the wishes of my leadership. This is the most vulnerable profession in civil engineering I found is the traffic engineer. And most of the traffic engineers stays under a lot of pressure. And unfortunately, most of the traffic engineers are managed and controlled by those folks who are not themselves are traffic engineers. so that's the problem, my problem with the perceived safety.
John,
I think that's the only
you want to respond. I'll let you take that one, John.
Okay. A part of the overall vision for this is we actually have another study through NCST, which is looked at performance measures for active transportation. And the idea, the overall vision of this is to be able to get, I think to what Shahid was talking about, we want to make this data-driven rather than opinion-driven. And to do that, we need to be able to collect the data, and then we may need to be able to have models to quantify that. So the overall vision to achieve solve the problem, or address the problem, I won't say solve completely, it won't be perfect, is that the kind of work that Georgia Tech is doing with the asset, first is to inventory these assets. The second part is to connect these up to other research. And there's work being done at Davis, and there's also being work done at Georgia Tech that actually takes this quantification of the assets, characterizes the assets quantitatively in a database, and then is able to actually calculate these these active transportation stress indicators, so that you can get so that it becomes a data collection model comparison of what the model says about traffic stress with priorities within your decision tree. And the idea is to move away from, and this is why actually pavement management 20 years ago or 30 years ago used to be somebody called in and complained about a pothole. Okay, let's go spend money on fixing that pothole. And the idea is to become proactive, measure the data, develop the models, set up the performance measures, and then run it through decision trees to prioritize with the limited amount of funding, always constrained funding that we have. So Shahid, that's the big vision of where we're trying to get to. And there was another question about, do we have to wait until all the research is done? And I think the answer is we can't wait. We need to get it good enough. Follows up on what Jesse was saying. We need to get it good enough that we have a pretty high probability that we're going to make things better and spend the money wisely and be implementing those. And so we have a consistent, the roadmap that James was showing, the idea is as you finish certain parts of it, you start to implement those, get feedback, keep improving those as you're moving through the roadmap and moving towards that final vision of data models, performance measures, decision, and it's a part of your everyday life.
Great, thanks, John. By the way, Professor Sai, is California the only state that you're working with on this, or are there other states that are also sort of part of this? I didn't quite catch. I know you did a survey with all the 50 states, but anyone else that is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Originally, I think in our research design is we have a quite intensive interview and review, basically based on the Caltrans and Georgia DOT. So those are almost each office we have. HAC also contribute to this one here too. So a quite intensive interview. And other than that, we're thinking about we wanted to get the 50 state, the whole US's response. Therefore, we further designed the questionnaire, sent out to 50 states. A lot of those responses there is coming from the entire nation's response, not just the one or two, because we did a more in-depth interview for almost a phone call, etc., for 2 states. But the responses there, as you can see, there's I think slide showing there, there's a 5 state, they are quite advanced, they already set up performance measure and they are moving forward. So this is kind of at the infancy stage for this complete street assets management. But I think some states they start moving forward on that. That's the one we see that. And it would be good to, at a national level, can we share the experience, different states, what kind of performance measure they set up, etc. As the one that earlier, the question about the perceived safety, as a matter of fact, that's the people kind of mentioned about some of the factor there. And as the science, what we try to do is try to quantify using the data. So for example, one of the PhD students, she also contributes on this, is April. I think she using the eye tracking device, try to quantify what's the responses when you're driving a bike. And if you have the infrastructure, the barrier, the people drive much safer, because in a way that one of the things is you don't want to analyze until crashes happen or even near crashes. But how do you capture people's feeling? And if you say perception, that's really qualitative. So in a way, her PhD study is quantitatively using eye tracking to see what people see, what people respond and looking to. So what we try to do is, even a safety area, we try to bring in what's the more quantitative, what's more data-driven to make a decision. And one of the things I want to point out, through the survey, a lot of people, they are lack of the usage, because you don't know the sidewalk. If you want to prioritize how many people are using this sidewalk and that sidewalk or bike. And that information, every agency, they wanted to know that. So they can, like asset manager, prioritize that too. So that's also part of the information needed, as well as the crashes data. A lot of time it's probably quite challenging for the people if there's the minor, the pedestrian, some of the accident occurred, probably they did not report. So those agencies are short of that information too. So I just want to share with that. So how do we using the technology to collect those data? In a physical condition, how do we have a systematic approach to assess? Because you say your rating and then the other person say their rating. How do we determine the entire California, which one here is more severe in terms of condition. And when you combine with safety as well as the usage, then you can have an overall prioritization in terms of how to allocate the money. Yeah. That's kind of ultimately is asset management. Yeah, and I totally agree with what they are talking about. You don't have to wait until perfect. It's one step at a time. It's a moving target. So I think as JC mentioned about perfection, I don't think you need to wait until perfection. You got to move forward. So anyway, that's something to share. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. And I do notice that we are at a break. You will get your full 15-minute break. And so why don't we go ahead and, but there is a question, Lyndall Price. So what maybe Dr. Tsai and John and just, will you be able to, both of you be able to stay for the whole time, or is it?
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you. So why don't we go ahead?
What time do we finish?
We are scheduled to finish at 10:25.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the next present will take a short break. And then at 9, we're supposed to start at 9:40, but we'll give it a 9. We'll start back up at 9:50. And then we will have Lauren Blackburn go ahead and present. You guys are doing a great, obviously a lot of interest in this area. But it's sort of a big, project. And Lauren will come in and sort of present on maybe some of the other agencies that maybe smaller agencies that might be able to do things maybe on a maybe smaller scale and not as such a huge effort. So, so if you can come back at 9:50, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll restart again.
Okay, thank you.
But that would be. Yeah, you're 3 hours ahead, so you'll have to do that calculation.
Okay, sure.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Success that the California has. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so we can get started. So let me get in some presentation mode. There we are. Oh. So yeah, that's my name and office over in Caltrans. We'll just go on. So I think you saw this in my last presentation, but just wanted to just kind of set the stage on. We probably had a record number of applications, but one of the areas that we have been very successful on is the pedestrian crossing enhancements. That set aside has been on the books or on the last cycle. I think the last 2 cycles, last 3, I can't remember, ever since set asides have been started. I think the last 3. So 119 applications we received that were for the set asides, and so. Then I'll break it down as far as what we did. And of course, this is the roadway safety projects, the type of countermeasures we funded. I won't go into that, but then here's for the signalized and non-signalized, the type of projects we funded. And then of course the pedestrian and bike projects. And these are the things that we funded in this last go around that really went for ped and bike safety. Pedestrian countdown signal heads, hybrid beacons, new sidewalks, bike lanes, of course, the ever popular rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I'm glad that got out of the area where at one time it was put on hold, and because of the proprietary issues when it comes to that countermeasure, but won't go into that. So I'm glad that it's over because that's proved to be very popular, and a lot of cities and counties are using that. LPIs, and then of course the whole set aside is for the new and upgrade crosswalk signing and markings as recommended by the MUTCD. So just going into the set aside of what happened, we had 75 local agencies were granted funding, 12 counties, 63 cities, 20 million were actually awarded. Well, we awarded 17.8 million. Agencies threw in, there was a couple agencies threw in more because they were doing more work, which is perfectly fine. But you're limited, of course, to the 250,000. And then you're limited to the countermeasures that set aside is in there. So we have rectangular rapid flashing beacons, enhanced signing and striping, and curb extensions were really the majority of the work that was in those set asides. Of course, then you can still go to the BCRs, which is the benefit cost process. You're more than welcome to go that direction. But with that, of course, you have to show crashes, and we don't allow the pedestrian hybrid beacon into the low cost, the set aside, just because of the cost and the expense. And we really need to show more data to approve those. So in that area, we had 35 agencies that were granted funding going through the benefit cost ratio process, 5 counties, 29 cities, about 46.9 million of HSIP funding. Projects range from 203,000, which is just that could have went as a 200, that could have went as a set aside. However, that agency also probably had a set aside, and then they also went forward with a benefit cost, which is totally allowed in our program to do that as well. You don't need to say, oh, I've got the set aside, I'm good. You can also come forward and submit a BCR if you need, if you want to go that route. So the range we saw was between 203 to 5.8 million. So that's a lot for pedestrian. But so I looked at it, and it's a city of Stockton was granted that. They got the highest amount. They're actually tackling 8 intersections in their city with pedestrian hybrid beacons, lighting, and other crossing improvements. So they were the winner this go around. The other types of countermeasures, of course, are funded are the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, of course, enhanced signing and striping, and curb extensions within those. And then here's some more pedestrian hybrid beacons, LPIs, median fencing, crosswalk enhancements, pedestrian countdown heads. So these are all the different countermeasures that we see in the applications under the benefit cost. So yeah, very successful. It's one of those, if you read the proposed legislation that's coming up, of course, obviously nothing is set in stone, but it looks like there will be some funding that's going to be dedicated towards pedestrian and bicycle safety, ped safety, as far as your making sure agencies set aside so much funding for that. We're well on our way in our local HSIP. I've looked back in our history, and we've got about a third of our funding is actually dedicated to ped and bike safety in our program. So we'll meet that, no problem. I think the state side will probably we'll have to work with the state side on that to work together on that. That's all I got for my summary. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Robert. And just a note with regards to next month, so we're actually in November, the session there, we are looking to do policies, procedures, and funding. We did hear that there was a few different efforts with webinars and other presentations that are available with regards to funding. So we may do a little bit of an adjustment because we don't want to maybe repeat, but depending on who's attending what sessions, so that may be something that in the future we may just lighten up the funding portion possibly. So just an FYI, but with that, why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions for any of the panelists, those who presented. Appreciate if you want to unmute yourself, just go ahead and raise your hand. You can ask it audibly, or we can go ahead and also take some of the questions in the Q&A. So, but like to always have the interaction first. So if you get first question, you get priority if you want to ask it audibly. So. And as we're doing that, thank you for all the presenters. Great job. Lots of interest in this subject, and we do hope that agencies got that information with regards to being able to start implementation, or at least starting the process to implementing and making saving lives. So let's see. All right. There are no hands up.
I
Oh,
had a
John,
question.
go ahead, John.
I had a question for the participants. For the local government folks, there are 5 major pavement management systems being used out there by local government. The biggest one, about 40%, is Street Saver. There's a couple other systems people are using out there. My question, and this is, I'm also the director of the City and County Pavement Improvement Center. My question is, are the pavement management systems that people are using in local government, do they have any capacity for active transportation features at this point? That might be a poll question, actually.
It looks like Shahid has his hand up.
Yeah, so we use micropaver. I'm familiar with other payment management program. Micropaver does not have the capacity. It does have a capacity for asset management. But I have used another system in Michigan. I think the Michigan standardized their payment management program, or a program which called RoadSoft, which was specially developed for the state of Michigan. And it has ton of capability from active transportation to asset management to, payment management program. And I think you can have the whole asset management on one program and you can add different modules to that program. And I think that program was specifically developed by Berkeley for the state of MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation. And I think they make it mandatory for all the state agencies to use that program. So once they are there to distribute the funds, they have a consistent platform to evaluate what is happening in the state.
Excellent. Yeah, micropaver is the second most used in the state, particularly in Southern California.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Lindell?
Oh, yes. And I'm just a member of the general public, but I have a question about the pavement and pedestrian crossings. Our county was looking at prioritizing curb ramps and outreach to the Placerville Mobility Support Group. And one of the responses they got was, well, the pavement in that crosswalk is so bad that our wheelchairs would get stuck in the middle of the street. So the curb ramps are irrelevant until the pavement's improved. And I know my sister-in-law, who has a back injury and uses an electric wheelchair, often finds the pavement in the pedestrian crossings so rough that it's painful for her. And I wondered how the pavement of the pedestrian crossings, is that given any special attention?
Would like to address that one first.
I can mention in the Caltrans pavement management system, it's not considered at this point. And I think this is kind of, a trip involves the first mile, the last mile, and the middle mile, or the first 100 feet, et cetera. And I think this is one of the arguments towards integrating these things together, because the walker and the bicyclist doesn't know who owns that pavement and who's managing it, but they need a safe and secure and comfortable trip.
And just want to add in a little thing here on the one thing there. I think this is kind of touches the logistic connectivity. So basically, you wanted to have a mobility. You want to make sure not only the current is there, but also how do you get to the current and cross the so I think it's quite important to kind of look from the connectivity perspective too. So earlier about a complete street like a sidewalk, it's not only one piece of segment. You look at what's their condition, but they all from the statewide. Probably you look into the network perspective. Where is the connectivity? Because you're putting the sidewalk and the curb, etc. You want to make sure people can move along that network, not just a piece of the sidewalk. So that's another piece there in terms of the prioritizing is from the network level, that mobility perspective. And I'm glad to point out that, yes, I think payment, that is the one important piece there. If you want to close the street, that is needed. So in a way, that kind of indicate there's a required integrated system to point out. Earlier, I think JC mentioned about it's not an add-on in terms of complete street. I totally agree with that. I thought of the idea of complete street is, can we either using the integrated or in a way is optimized. So the payment assets management already there, but how do we leverage the resources that for complete street to all the data collection effort, et cetera, can we optimize? So that we're going to be make that implementation a lot efficient or quicker. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna, let's see, I see Sahid's hand up. I think Hajid also might have had one. I don't know, Hajid, if you want to ask your question first, otherwise we'll take one last question and then we'll try to answer the rest of them in the chat pod. So
can you hear me, Peter?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, John. This is Hossein Ajid, the city of Carlsbad. Good to see you.
Hey.
Hey. We actually utilize Lucidity for payment management system, and also, I mean, we also have the 5-year assessment that we hire one of the consultants, then they drive our roads to give us condition assessment. But ATP is not considered. But city of Carlsbad is very, very active on active transportation planning and mobility. We have actually a division for that. So we like to consider that. And, I like to know if you have any feedback or you have any solutions for that. But we do utilize Lucidity for payment management.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't, at this point, I think we're really, this integration into asset management is mainstream. I'll call it mainstream because active transportation is mainstream, pavement is mainstream, but we got to break down some of those silos and find ways that this funding is prioritized and optimized, as James said, together. So that, yeah, that's really, I think it's early days on getting that together. I'm not aware of where that's really happening in a comprehensive way yet.
Okay, I see we've got 3 minutes left. And Sahid, if you can make it quick, we might be able to take your question. Otherwise, we can address it in the chat pod. Because I think Nicole can probably do the evaluation and wrap ups probably in a couple minutes. So
I think I'm good. My question was answered. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, Nicole, do you want to take it away then?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Peter. I have dropped the evaluation link in the chat box. If everyone can go ahead and select that and complete that before you sign off today, we would very much appreciate it. And if that concludes the questions for today, again, we appreciate you signing on for today, and a big thank you to all of our speakers and presenters who have joined us. We really appreciate your insight. And if okay, I will gather the presentations and share them following this webinar today. I will send out an email with the presentations, and we will plan to post the recording on the ATRC website, and we will send a notice once that is available for everyone. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. If you are able to stick around, I will keep the webinar open for any last minute questions, and hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.